Keep up with all things Central Nebraska and more. Find us on Facebook and Twitter.
Good evening, and welcome to the Legislative Candidate Forum for Legislative District 35. Thank you for being here and for your interest in the legislative race. My name is George Ayub, and I will be your moderator for tonight's forum, which is brought to you by The Independent. We also like to welcome those who are watching us at home or on their mobile devices on the independent.com live stream broadcast. That broadcast will be available, should be up tomorrow for a replay anytime you'd like to see that. So you can go to the independent.com and find that, the button to see that live stream broadcast. Before I introduce our three candidates, I'd like you to please welcome Ms. Tracy Overstreet and Mr. Jack Sheard, who will be asking most of tonight's questions. Ms. Overstreet is the government reporter at The Independent, where she writes about legislative issues. Mr. Sheard is the program chairman for Leadership Tomorrow. He is also marketing and communications coordinator for the Grand Island Public Schools. So now let's meet our candidates. Feel free to applaud them now and then again at the end of the forum. First of all, Mr. Greg Newhouse, Mr. Dan Quick, and Mr. Zachary Zoller. We'd like to thank each of you gentlemen for your participation in this forum. Here are the ground rules for tonight. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to make an opening statement. And then we'll start with the questions. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer a question. Candidates may choose if they want to clarify what they said earlier, or if they want to offer a rebuttal to a comment made by another candidate. They'll have 30 seconds to do that after the after the question was answered before. Each candidate will then have 1 minute for a closing statement. Our timekeepers are from Leadership Tomorrow, and they'll keep the candidates aware of how much time they have left. If a candidate goes over their time, I will politely interrupt so we can keep the evening moving. The candidates drew cards, looked like a poker game up here earlier tonight. They drew cards for opening, closing statements in the order of answering questions. And so once again, for the sake of time and efficiency, please no applause until the end of the forum. And so we're going to start with our opening statements, and Mr. Newhouse goes first.
Good evening. Thank you. Since July 2015, when my opponents announced that they were running for the legislature, dozens of people have asked me. Again, good evening. Since July of 2015, when my opponents announced that they were running for the legislature, I've had dozens of people ask me if I would enter this race. Leslie and I talked about it, and we prayed about it, and we made the decision. I got into this race for my grandchildren. Their generation is my concern, and what we do in this election is going to affect Nebraska and Grand Island for the next 20 years or more. We have three candidates with a similar goal: to be your next senator. That's where our similarities end. We're different by education, experience, philosophy, and character. I want your vote because I want to make Nebraska and Grand Island an even better place to live, work, and raise a family. I will work for meaningful tax cuts for our families and our businesses. I'll work to address the state aid to education formula so that our schools can educate and prepare our children to be successful in the modern world. And I'll work to reduce burdensome and overbearing government regulations so that our businesses can grow and create more high-paying jobs. As a small business owner with my wife Leslie and property owners, we're invested in Grand Island. But our real investment is our family. My roots and my branches are here in Grand Island. From my grandparents to my grandchildren, we're 5 generations of Islanders. We are Grand Island. I've practiced law for 36 years, and I think it's important that someone making law knows the law and obeys the law. I've testified yearly before legislative committees on a number of subjects. I'm called upon by sitting state senators to draft legislation on their behalf. And I know how to take on the liberal influence that has taken over our legislature. I can represent Grand Island as it must be represented, with passion, commitment, and as a conservative advocate.
Mr. Quick?
All right. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for being here tonight. I'd like to thank the Independent for putting this on. I'd especially like to thank my wife Alice for all her support and help that she's given me on the campaign trail. I'd like to thank family and friends who are supporting me and all of you in the audience out here as well. And I'd like to thank the other two candidates for participating and being here as well. My name is Dan Quick, and I'm running for state legislature because I want to be a voice for working families. I grew up on a small family farm near Hortonville, Nebraska, where my father and my mother taught me the value of hard work, to respect everyone you come across, and to be your brother's and your sister's keeper. They not only taught me those values, but they live them every day. And I've lived them in my life as well, and I passed them down to my children. I met my wife Alice in 1978. We were married in 1980, and we settled here in Grand Island. We raised our family here. We have 3 children, Michael, Stephen, and Christine. We have 7 grandchildren now. And they're a part of our lives, and we love them very much. I've worked at the power plant for 27 years. My wife Alice has worked at the hospital for 38 years as a labor and delivery nurse. And I think every mother and grandmother in Grand Island knows who my wife is. At least that's what I'm finding out going door to door. My background in agriculture, my background in working family issues, and my background in public power and my life experiences are what make me a well-rounded candidate and will help me represent you well down to the Nebraska State Legislature. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quick. Mr. Zoll?
Good evening. Next year, good evening. Next year, our state is going to celebrate its sesquicentennial. 150 years ago, pioneers came across this land seeking a better life. They didn't find mountains, oceans, oil fields, or gold, but what they found then and what we cherish today is God's abundance of water, great agricultural land, hardworking people, and what we like to call the good life. This anniversary is a good time to ask ourselves, what do we want for the future of our state? What do we want Nebraska to offer our children and our grandchildren? To me, the answer is opportunity. Opportunity for working men and women to have gainful employment and strong income. Opportunity for our young people to receive a quality education. Opportunity for businesses to grow and prosper, creating jobs and serving as an economic engine. Opportunity for all through hard work and commitment to achieve their full potential and realize their dreams here at home. How do we achieve opportunity? I believe we do this through less government bureaucracy and regulation, fiscal responsibility, targeting government spending in impactful ways, investing in education, not spending more, but spending it wisely, and promoting a culture of personal responsibility with government's role to provide a lift up, not a handout. I believe it is time to reaffirm our principles, our values, our traditions, and our dreams and aspirations. And I have a record of standing up for you and standing up for this community. I'm a candidate for the legislature to be a strong voice, an effective voice for Grand Island. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zoll. Okay, we will start with our questions. Mr. Sheard has the first question, and Mr. Newhouse will be the first to answer, followed by Mr. Quick and then Mr. Zoll.
Voters throughout the state say that high property taxes are the top issue in the state. What would be your plan for lowering property taxes, and how would you replace lost revenue for local government entities?
Well, first of all, property taxes are assessed by local political entities, not the state. But the state needs to cut back on its unfunded mandates that force local school boards to raise property taxes. We need to rework the state aid to education formula to decrease the reliance on property tax. When the formula was created, it was supposed to be 3 prongs, equal prongs: property tax, sales tax, and income tax. It's been reworked a number of times, and it's now very reliant, heavily reliant on property tax. So we need to go back to that original formula. And this will allow our local school boards to reduce their mill levy. And as voters, we need to hold our local school boards accountable so that they put more money into the classrooms and less money into wasteful bureaucracy. So those would be my plans. And I think we can spread that tax beyond just the property taxes that we're paying. 65% of our property taxes go to the schools. And so that's our number one culprit, if you will. The cities and the counties don't spend that much money in relationship to property taxes like the school districts do. So we have to take control there.
Thank you. Mr. Quick?
Well, I know that property tax issue is something that I hear about going door to door. And one of the things we got to make sure is that Grand Island does get their fair share of the property tax money for their schools. The other thing that we need to, that I'm not sure a lot of people understand is that Nebraska ranks 49th in the country in state school aid. So we need to, work on that to make sure that Grand Island and rural schools and children receive the same affordable education that children in Lincoln and Omaha are receiving. I know the Nebraska State Legislature works on that every year. They work on the property taxes, they work on all 3 taxes. This year they were able to give a property tax relief to the ag industry, farmers and ranchers, and I know they've given property tax relief in previous years, and it's a tough issue down there at the state legislature. I know they work really hard on trying to make it fair for everyone, make it sure that everybody is treated fairly in the tax system, and that's what I would try to do when I get down there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Zoll?
I believe that property taxes in Nebraska at the present time have spiraled out of control. This is not sustainable. A new home in the Copper Creek subdivision, which is intended for low to moderate income families, is paying $3,000 a year in property tax. We have to solve this problem. We have to first make sure that property taxes do not increase, and that's going to require a partnership between the state and the local governments. But the real answer, I think, is to recognize that we're a large state with a small population, and the real answer to this is to grow and develop our economy, to put an aggressive plan in place to promote economic development, to grow our tax base, because as long as we have this small population trying to support state and local governments, it's going to be a very difficult problem to solve. So to me, the long-term strategic plan is to really focus on doing what some of our neighboring states have done. In South Dakota and Iowa and Kansas, they've attracted high-tech industry, they've diversified their economy, they've grown their tax base, they've created more jobs, and as a result, property taxes have become manageable.
Thank you. Anybody have any follow-up for 30 seconds, Mr. Newhouse?
Briefly, yes. Mr. Quick said we need to make sure we get our fair share of the tax dollars. We get all of the tax dollars. That's a local tax. And I think you have to understand the issue before you can fix it. And so to think, I thought I was in a Democrat debate to hear fair share, fair share. That's not this issue.
Mr. Quick?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I should clarify that I want to make sure that we receive our fair share of this state funding for schools. And also, for Mr. Zoll, I would say that I know that Kansas is experiencing a lot of hardship right now because of the fact that they've reduced their taxes so far that their schools are in trouble. So, thank you.
Mr. Zoll, anything?
A couple of years ago, the legislature undertook a tax modernization study, easy for me to say, where they tried to come up with a long-term strategic plan for tax reform. I think we have to go back to that plan and really look at this in a macro fashion. There are many, many exemptions in the tax code that are causing property taxes to be higher than they should be, and I think we have to look at those exemptions particularly.
All right, thank you. Our next question will come from Ms. Overstreet, and Mr. Quick will be the first to answer.
Candidate, since you brought up school funding so much for the property tax, we had planned a school funding question later in the evening, but we're going to move that up because I think it dovetails into what so many of you have talked about here, and the fair share issue, and making sure that there is a balance between schools having operational budgets, whether they're a rural school with a lot of agricultural valuation or more urban related schools. But please talk about, since this was talked about so much in the last legislative session, what potential solutions that you would offer to make sure that all schools do have an operational budget that's needed to provide that quality education, whether they are rural or if they are from farm communities or in more urban communities or communities like Grand Island that has a very high poverty rate. Grand Island has 56% of students receiving free lunches. It's a high poverty rate here. What's your solution?
Well, the thing we need to do is we're going to have to be diligent about working to make sure that these children can receive the same education, quality education as children in schools in Omaha and Lincoln, and I went to school in Hortville, so there was 11 kids in my class. You see kids now going to school in Grand Island even, where the class sizes are getting so large, up to 35 students, maybe 40 students. We just need to work on those issues to see if we can make sure that each child is afforded that same quality education. And the rural schools, I know I've talked to people at rural schools, and they don't feel like they're treated fairly, receiving the same tax funds that the bigger schools are receiving. So, thank you.
Mr. Zoll?
I think the answer really rests not in spending more, but how we spend our resources on education, both at the federal, state, and local level. We're seeing our budgets consumed by ridiculous federal mandates. We're seeing an increase in educational bureaucracies. We have these regional education support districts now, and increasingly we're devoting resources not to the classroom, but into bureaucracy associated with government. We have a $100 billion federal education budget, and we have a state education budget as well. We've got to get those dollars back in our local school districts under local control, being devoted principally to the classroom.
Thank you. Mr. Newhouse?
Thank you. You know, with funding comes control. And the federal and the state governments are ruining education in Nebraska. We teach to test, period. Teachers have no latitude, school boards have no control, and heaven forbid if we get Common Core. It will be twice as bad, maybe worse than that. I wish we could get rid of all state funding and all federal funding and give the local school boards and the local taxpayers the control that we used to have back when we had great schools. And I'm the last guy to ever propose a new tax, but we need a fee on transfers of money out of our state to foreign countries. There are a heck of a lot of people that go to our schools and use our services that don't pay any property tax, and they don't pay much of anything else. And we need to tap into that source. We send hundreds of millions of dollars out of our state to foreign countries with no fee. A simple $10 fee per transfer would create a huge fund, and I think it should all be used for our schools.
Thank you. Any follow-up on school funding? Okay, we're going to move on. Mr. Sheard? And this first, for Mr. Zoll, will be first.
A year ago, the legislature voted to repeal the death penalty, even overriding a veto from the governor. Now a petition drive has put the issue before the voters with a referendum to be on the November ballot. If you had been in the legislature a year ago, how would you have voted and why?
I support the death penalty. I believe some crimes are so despicable, so heinous, that only the ultimate punishment is an appropriate form of justice. I also believe it's a deterrent. I think of the prison riot we had in Tecumseh last year, where prisoners sentenced to life in prison were threatening the lives of others, including corrections officers and police officers. What protection would there be for our public safety personnel if someone on a life sentence had no consequence but another life sentence? I think we have the concept for many hundreds of years in our religious faith of the concept of self-defense. Self-defense for us, self-defense for our society, and some acts demand nothing less than the death penalty.
Thank you, Mr. Newhouse.
Well, it's not an easy moral decision for me because I am pro-life, but I'm pro-innocent life. And I personally support the death penalty, and I would have voted against that, and I would have voted to sustain the veto by Governor Ricketts. And I have some different reasons. I've actually tried a murder case. I'm probably the only one in the room. But actually, the death penalty can save money. And the advocates against it are dead wrong. I'll give you an example. When the gentleman, the man, stalked and murdered his wife in Buffalo County, and then stalked and murdered Todd Ellsberg here in our streets, the Buffalo County attorney did not bring a capital case. He didn't plead the special circumstances. And Mark Young, our county attorney, was smart enough to do so. And what that did is it created a quandary for that defendant. Do I face the death penalty or do I plead to both of them? And by doing that, he probably saved us $100,000 or more per county. And so when they say when it costs money, it doesn't. It saves money. And it costs no more to house a death row inmate than an inmate with a sentence for life without parole. That's a myth.
Thank you, Mr. Quick.
Well, I'm also a pro-life candidate from conception and to death. So I would have voted against the death penalty. My reasons for that is because of my faith, and I know the Nebraska voters will decide that in November, and I will go along with whatever their wishes are, and that will be addressed at that time in the legislature. I know that it's been a long time since they've executed anyone. They can't get the drugs right now, so I don't know how they're going to come about deciding how they're going to put anyone to death at that time. But maybe they'll have to change the laws to another form of execution style. I'm not sure they can do that. So that's where I stand. Thank you.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Mr. Zoll?
I would just like to add that the federal government has a federal death penalty, and many other states do as well. And the federal government in many states have been able to carry out the death penalty. We really just have to come up with the same approach that the other states and the federal government have used to carry out that penalty.
Thank you. Next question will come from Ms. Overstreet.
This question is about Medicaid expansion. The governor has raised lots of concerns about the long-term cost of expanding Medicaid in the state of Nebraska. Yet there was a recent study out, letter from 2 UNK professors outlining some of the more immediate effects, the short-term effects of Medicaid expansion, including some additional revenue for medical practitioners, that it would help some particularly rural hospitals that some have closed, such as the one in Tobin, because of bad debt brought on by uninsured patients. What is your position, candidates, on Medicaid expansion and its impact on consumers, employers, medical practitioners, and on taxpayers?
Mr. Newhouse will start.
Well, I oppose Medicaid expansion. Let's call it what it is. It's expanding Obamacare. And we cannot count on the federal government to keep its promises on funding. They've lied to us too many times. We can't count on them. Expanding Obamacare, Medicare, in Nebraska will lead to cuts in education funding. And it will lead to cuts in funding roads and infrastructure. And it will lead to tax increases. And I can't support any of those things, and Nebraskans can't afford this expansion.
Thank you. Mr. Quick?
Well, I go back to my faith on this, and I was raised that we take care of the sick and we take care of the poor. And the fact is there's 97,000 Nebraskans who fall in the coverage gap at the present time. And of those 97,000, they all fall below the poverty line. Something needs to happen. We need to increase wages so people don't have to worry about whether they can put food on the table or buy health insurance, or we have to expand Medicaid. The next fact is that the federal government said they would pay 90% for the first 10 years. This last legislation, the legislature put forth a bill that said that they would revisit the law, if it was passed, that they would revisit the law if the federal government fell below their responsibility of 90%. The other fact of the matter is that our tax dollars that go to the federal government now go to pay for Medicaid expansion, and other states are receiving that money, those dollars. And Nebraska's foregoing a lot of money that could come into the state that would help grow the economy by helping hospitals, helping those people that need the Medicaid, and helping medical care providers. Thank you.
Mr. Zoll?
I'm opposed to Medicaid expansion, and I'm opposed to it on moral grounds. I'm opposed to expanding any federal program that we have no intention of paying for. And unfortunately, that's what we're doing at the federal level. We have a $19 trillion deficit. And we're not paying for Medicaid expansion in these states. We're having our children and our grandchildren pay for it because we're putting that expense on a credit card, and we're not paying the bill. So any program that our federal government doesn't intend to pay for now, that they just want to rack up the federal debt so future generations get saddled with that, to me that is an immoral proposition. And at the state level, at the federal level, we have to stop spending money that we don't have.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Mr. Newhouse?
I agree. Bigger government is not the answer. We're of the same faith. And the charge to feed the poor and to heal the sick is personal. That's not a directive to the government. He wasn't talking to Caesar. He was talking to people. And I think I have that obligation, but I don't think my government does.
Anybody else? Any other follow-up? Mr. Quick?
And I agree with that. I mean, that's my personal faith, and that's how I feel about it. But, and I do, I'm sorry, I can't remember what you said, Mr. Zolman. I was going to react to that too, but I'm sorry.
Just last point I make. I think there are things we can do as a country that would help this state provide medical care for all people. One of the things we can do is eliminate the federal prohibition on insurance companies crossing state lines. That's an artificial infringement on competition. It raises costs to our consumer. It raises the cost to medical professionals, and it doesn't serve the provision of health care to our people.
Thank you. Mr. Sheard, and the first question goes to, or this question goes to Mr. Quick first.
Why would you or would you not have voted to override Governor Ricketts' veto of LB 947, the measure that now allows immigrants with temporary legal standing access to professional and commercial licenses in over 170 professions?
These children were brought here by no fault of their own. They went through our education system. They're moving on to colleges, and they're going to be attaining their licenses. Now, if they can't obtain those licenses, they can't be productive members of society. I do believe that I would have voted for them to get these licenses. They're going to go to other states and be productive members in those states. But those children are working hard in their schools now. They're going on to college, and they're receiving that education so that they can get those licenses, so they can be school teachers. They could be, I know they could have CDL licenses. They could be doctors. They could be lawyers. They could be anything that requires a license. And I don't know that they should be held back. They've been here for several years, and that's how I feel about it. Thank you.
Mr. Zoll?
I would have proposed an amendment to that bill That amendment would stipulate that those that received such licenses from the state in exchange would have to agree to a provision that they would not be entitled to state benefits, entitlements, welfare, that would be a privilege extended by the state with that contingency associated with it. It is a tough, difficult issue because these young people did nothing illegal. Their parents did. So you're somewhat conflicted, and I am at least, in terms of how you treat the children of the parents who, due to no fault of their own, ended up here and are now in this situation. So with that caveat that I expressed, I could be supportive of that provision.
Mr. Newhouse.
Well, first of all, that amendment would have been filibustered by Senator Chambers, Senator Mello, and Senator Moorfield, so it would have never seen the light of day. I would have voted against the override. Governor Ricketts was right. I would not have voted for the original bill. It's much too broad and more expansive than similar bills in other states. I don't support providing taxpayer funding and benefits for illegal aliens, period. The bill extends extra benefits well beyond the children it was intended to help. It will extend full taxpayer benefits to tens of thousands of illegal aliens currently in Nebraska. And it'll give an incentive to for more of them to come, to take advantage of those benefits. It will cost the state of Nebraska millions of dollars that we simply do not have.
Thank you. Any follow-up from any candidate?
One follow-up question. Oh, two follow-up questions.
Okay. First of all, okay, you guys go ahead and follow up.
Just to be clear, Mr. Zoll, as is, would you have voted to override or to not?
No, I would have sustained the governor's veto. I would not have voted to override.
All right. Ms. Overstreet, you had a follow-up?
Yes, I have a question too. This goes to Mr. Zoll on the amendment that you were speaking about that you would have proposed. You would have had a stipulation that they could receive a professional license if they would sign that they don't get any benefits, welfare, any type of... What I'm wondering here, some programs are not geared toward the adult, but geared toward feeding the children of the adults. Are you saying that new young Nebraskans would not have the ability to get food stamps or medical care under some of the programs that currently exist if their parents signed this and maybe got a nursing degree or something?
Let me try to clarify that. I'm opposed to providing benefits, public benefits, to anyone that is not here in this country legally. Now, this particular bill, I think, was fairly limited to professional licenses and whether these individuals could receive these licenses. Did that speak to your question?
Well, what I'm wondering though, if you're having them sign a provision that they can't have any public benefits, you may be harming might you not be harming someone who's not the actual recipient? I mean, a child?
I'm not asking to sign anything. I'm just advancing an amendment that would be part of the law, that extending a professional license would not in any way, shape, or form extend benefits.
Okay, we're going to move on. Ms. Overstreet has a question, and Mr. Zoll will be first to answer.
Several states, including Nebraska, have considered or passed measures that allow what opponents charge is legalized discrimination against LGBT individuals under the guise of religious liberty. Proponents argue their religious rights are at stake. Please explain what political philosophy will guide you in developing policy and laws around civil rights issues.
I support traditional values that we've held dear in this state and this country for a couple hundred years now. I do not believe there should be added protections for any additional classes of people. I think current law is sufficient. I filled out a questionnaire recently, and it asked for my gender, and it gave me 6 choices You know, it wasn't that long ago. You were either male or female. You gave me 6 choices. And I think this speaks to something that's happening to our core values that's very destructive to the fabric of any society. And those norms that we've taken for granted forever are now every day being eroded. And I think traditional family values is the fabric of our country, it's the fabric of our community, and I believe very strongly that we need to uphold those. And without getting into the particulars of any given state religious liberty bill, I certainly support those states that have passed bills that said that you go to the restroom of your birth gender.
Mr. Newhouse.
Thank you. I agree with most of that. I testified 2 years ago in front of the Judiciary Committee on this very issue. I was requested by several of the state senators to testify. And in that case, they were talking about special rights that, with regard to children, adoption, foster care, and so forth. And I'm experienced in that area. You know, I've represented children, I've represented parents in those issues. And so I testified against that. And I think to a great extent, and I testified at that meeting, that we have a solution without a problem. I just don't think we need to go out there and create another class of protected people. There's an old saying in real estate, you don't buy a lawsuit. Well, this is going to hurt the very people that they intend to help, because they're not going to hire a lawsuit either. And so I think it's all backwards. And like Mr. Zoll, I'm a family-oriented, traditional values guy.
Thank you, Mr. Quick.
Yeah. And I live my life according to how my parents brought me up. I live my Christian values. I hold them close to my heart. And the thing that I also realize is that I don't judge other people by how they choose to live their life. So on my faith side, I choose to live my life how I choose, and only God can judge me on those issues. Under the law, and the Constitution, no one should be discriminated against in the United States of America. And we are all people under the law, and everyone has equal value. Everyone is a productive member of society, and those people should not be discriminated against in this country, but yet it happens every day. There are people out there who are discriminated against for the way they choose to live their life, and it happens out there. So that's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Mr. Zoll?
I attended a legislative hearing this winter before the Education Committee where they were talking about that bill that would entitle transgendered students to use restrooms other than their birth gender. That room was packed with Nebraskans that opposed that proposition of boys going into girls' restrooms or vice versa. I think that's the dangerous, slippery slope that we're at right now.
Okay. Mr. Newhouse?
It's not judgmental, and it's not prejudice, and it's not bias to not create a special privilege. What you're advocating is a special privilege. That's discrimination. When you create a special privilege for a special group that is not protected in the Constitution, you're creating a special privilege, and you're discriminating.
Okay, I'm going to jump in here. All three of you came into this election having never held a political office. Who do you look to specifically as a political mentor, and for what reasons? And this question goes to you first, Mr. Newhouse.
Ronald Reagan. He is my hero. There was very little that Ronald Reagan did that I disagree with. One, however, was amnesty. That was his biggest mistake. I like to paraphrase him often. It's not that we tax too little, it's that we spend too much. And that's the philosophy that I'll go to Lincoln with. We're going to reduce our spending. And I heard Governor Ricketts today say, Our budget only went up 3.6% this year, and before it was going up 6.5%. That's not a cut. I want to say we reduced our budget by 3.5% this year. That's a cut, and that's a taxpayer cut. So Ronald Reagan, I'd say second Thomas Jefferson. I think he was brilliant, and I've read many books about him, and think he's a hero for our country.
Thank you. Mr. Quick?
Well, I'd have to say Annette Dubas. She's the person that come to me and talked to me about running, and she did so much down at the state legislature for a lot of people. And she's still working for people down there, even though she's not in the state legislature. She's been an important role model for me. She's been a mentor for me, and I appreciate everything that she's done for the people of Nebraska and for her district, 34. Thank you.
Mr. Zoll?
I'm going to have to echo Mr. Newhouse. Ronald Reagan, to me, provided inspirational leadership for a limited government. And to me, that message of a limited federal government was so important, and it's even more important today. And I would argue the same thing for state government. I believe in local control, limited federal government focused on core functions such as national defense, and the government that's closest to the people represents the people the best. And that's where we can affect our lives and control our destiny with respect to public services, public spending, and taxation. So to me, Reagan was able to offer that message in a very uplifting, constructive way. And he worked not only with Republicans, but he was very effective in building coalitions with Democrats. And I've been very effective in working with coalitions of people at the local level and getting folks to work together. So he's a role model for me.
Thank you. We will start with a question from Mr. Sheard. We will start this time with Mr. Quick.
Nebraska's minimum wage rose to $9 in January. Some other states have raised their minimum wage to between $10 and $15 an hour. What hourly minimum wage do you think is appropriate in Nebraska, and why?
Well, I believe the voters, we've decided on 9, so right now for the minimum wage, I would agree with that one for the time being. The thing I found out going door to door is there are a lot of families who are struggling in this town. You go to their door and there's people that, I talked to a woman the other day. She works 2 jobs. Her husband works another job. He works all the overtime he can get, and they're still struggling to get by. I talked to another woman that but going door to door, I've talked to several families who are struggling and barely getting by. They're deciding whether to put food on the table. They're deciding whether they can buy insurance. They're deciding whether they can clothe their children. And we need to get skilled labor jobs in this town. We need to bring more jobs in this town to raise the wages. And it may not happen by minimum wage, but it needs to happen by bringing industry in this town to create higher paying jobs so families can support their kids. Thank you.
Mr. Zoll?
Well, the voters have spoken, and they've embraced the minimum wage that we have today. And I'm not going to differ with that conclusion. The people have spoken. But I would oppose any future increases in the minimum wage. I'm especially concerned that as states, our state or any state, continues to raise the minimum wage, what it's really impacting is our young people, our high school students and our college students. In large measure, the numbers are clear. Most of the people making minimum wage are the young people just starting out in the workforce. So I think increasing the minimum wage without making an exception, an allowance for those young people, really eliminates the number of jobs available to them. I talked to a lot of folks in Grand Island as I've been going throughout the community. I know what our local businesses pay, including the fast food places. They generally pay more than minimum wage, and they have, but I'm real concerned about our young people.
Mr. Newhouse?
There is no minimum wage. I'm an Adam Smith economist. The market will set the wage. And if we quit saying that Americans won't do certain jobs, so we have to allow illegal aliens in to do those jobs, and they leave, we're not going to have that problem. You know, instead of worrying about a minimum wage, be the best employee you can be. In an entry-level job, get there early, stay there late, without pay. You're going to be so valuable that you'll never have to worry about making the minimum. No employer would fire you if you do that. So if we raise the minimum wage to 15, everybody's then going to be raised. I pay a paralegal 15, let's say. Well, now she wants a 50% raise because the minimum wage went up 50%. And it's an escalating thing. And now the people that are making minimum wage are making $30,000 a year, and guess what? They're in a higher tax bracket. And all the costs have gone up, and they're worse off than they were before. They're going to be eliminated from their jobs. It's the worst thing you can do. Read Adam Smith.
Any follow-up from anyone? We'll move on. Ms. Overstreet? Mr. Zoll will be first.
A petition drive is underway to legalize casino gambling at horse racing tracks. Do you support this proposal, and what is your opinion on expanded gambling in the state of Nebraska?
As a general rule, I'm opposed to expanded gambling. I don't have any problem with this going to voters. I think this is something the voters should be able to speak to, because we've talked about this year after year after year. So let's let the people decide. We already have state-sponsored gambling in Nebraska. It's operated by the state government. It's called the lottery. We have gambling at Fowler Park. I don't know that folks in Grand Island have a problem with gambling at Fowler Park, but expanded gambling does not benefit our society. It does not benefit our state. But would I deprive the people a chance to vote on it? No, I think this is something that people have a right to speak to. I'm very concerned that regardless of what happens with that proposition, we should do everything we can within the confines of what I just stated to support live horse racing at Fowler Park. Fowler Park provides hundreds and hundreds of jobs. It infuses millions of dollars into our community, and it's a part of our culture and our heritage, and I do think we should try to do something to help Fowler Park.
Mr. Newhouse?
Well, obviously, Mr. Zoll hasn't been back in Nebraska very long because the voters have voted on it a number of times, and they've rejected it. And it's obviously a very contentious subject, and I personally don't gamble. By the draw of the cards tonight, you can see why. I'm not good at it. And the voters have consistently voted to refrain expanded gambling. But every state around us has some form of gambling. So I'm not sure we're protecting anyone anymore. And we're probably missing some revenue, but there are some social costs that you have to concern yourself with too. Our level of bankruptcies will go up, our divorces will go up, because those things are driven by that gambling dollar. And we're a little bit late to jump on the bandwagon. So I need to study the economics of it before deciding exactly how to vote, but I'm inclined to vote for expanded gambling. I think it would be a financial benefit to Fowler Park, and if it's a benefit to Fowler Park, it's a benefit to Grand Island, and if it's a benefit to Grand Island, you have to look at it favorably.
Mr. Brick?
Yeah, I'd have to see more research on how that would affect, families in Grand Island, how it would affect everybody. But I would say I would stay neutral on that until I could see how that would affect everyone. I know there's worries about gambling addictions, same as with drug and alcohol addictions. It affects people that way. But I also know that it's benefited other states and helped them out with their tax dollars. Helped provide money for schools and for other things. So at this time, I would say I would stay neutral. And the petition drive, I guess, if it goes on the ballot, the voters will decide which way they will want to go on that. So.
Mr. Zoll, follow up?
Well, I'm well aware of our history in Nebraska of dealing with the issue of gambling and having votes on it. Sometimes contentious issues don't go away. You just have to keep addressing them over and over again, and people's views change, and our population, of course, changes. We're not the same people we were 30 years ago or 20 years ago or 10 years ago. So maybe if people want to sign petitions to put it on the ballot and vote on it and weigh in on it, then we have our answer. And that's what democracy is all about.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on. Mr. Sheard.
Nebraska's state prison system is chronically overcrowded. What course of action would you propose to address this problem?
This is the first answer would be Mr. Jonas.
Well,
Your mic.
that's also a very tough issue. I've been involved in the criminal justice system, and I think that some have tried to get mandatory minimums. I think that's a bad job because I think our judges do a good job, and I think our county attorneys do a good job of knowing how to charge the crime and what sentences should be doled out. But you have to have tough sentences for violent offenders, for sexual predators, for drug dealers, for gang members, to protect our children and our grandchildren and ourselves. And so I know it's a problem, and I don't just want to send money after the problem. More vocational education I think might be a problem. Closing off the benefits to illegals I think would be a problem. Building a wall I think would be a solution to the problem. But most of that is done at the federal level. And so as long as we keep having criminals, we're going to have to incarcerate them, and we're going to have to pay the price.
Mr. Quick.
Yeah, I realize that's a tough issue as well. The thing is that there are some people who get sent to prison. Maybe they're sent there for something that's not, they're not a habitual criminal. They're not there for maybe for a marijuana use or something like that. Some of these criminals can be rehabilitated and put back into society. And we need to work to that end because I think we can reduce the population in our prisons by finding those people who actually who are not habitual criminals, who not like you said, sex offenders or someone who comes out or robs you or takes money from you. So I think to that end we can work to reducing prison population by rehabilitating those that can be. Thank you.
Mr. Zoll.
I believe the answer to prison overcrowding is twofold. First, we need to do what Hall County has done. The state has worked with Hall County to incarcerate low-risk offenders in the Hall County Jail. That's been done for years, and it should be a program that is replicated all over the state. It would help the counties, it would help the state, it would relieve overcrowding. Second, I think we need to look at prison sentences for low-risk offenders and look at some innovative forms of sentences and penalties such as the drug courts that we have in place today, where the drug courts are designed to keep people out of prison but to advance the program of rehabilitation. And now we're looking at other kinds of special courts like problem-solving courts, veterans courts. When it comes to incarcerating people at the state prison, I think we need to make a distinction between offenders that we're mad at because they've done something that is contrary to our laws, and those that we're afraid of. And those that we're afraid of need to be in the state prison. Those that we're mad at, let's look at programs to rehabilitate them, drug courts, probation, programs to allow them to be contributing members to society after their criminal offense.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Mr. Jonas?
Yes. It's another case of having to know the law before you make law. Marijuana use in Nebraska is an infraction. There's no one in our prison system for using marijuana. You have to have over a certain amount, which makes you a dealer. So you got to know the law.
Okay, we'll go on. Ms. Overstreet has the next question.
I want to go back to property tax issue, and we all know that property taxes are a local issue, but since you're all vying for the job that sets the policy on how that local tax is applied, I want to talk a little bit more about it. And how far should the legislature go in some of the property tax relief measures that have been debated time and time again? These three things, how far should the legislature go on these property tax relief measures? Property tax exemptions, reducing valuation assessments, which was recently done in this session, and allowing tax deferment, such as through tax increment financing.
Thank you. Mr. Quick, you're first on this.
All I know they've worked on the property tax relief. As far as exemptions, you know, I guess I'd have to do more research on that one. I know that the Nebraska State Legislature works every year very hard on trying to help with those issues. The problem we have to look at is to make sure that we provide the revenues we need for the things that we need. I'm sorry, I guess
Mr. Zoll?
In regard to tax exemptions, we only have 60 seconds, so I would say I think we've gone too far with the tax exemptions that we have in place. And that's part of the Modernization Committee proposal that we really look at that I spoke to earlier. In terms of reducing value, we've just done it with agriculture, but when crop prices were high, you know, there weren't any complaints then. We have to recognize that these cycles with ag values are very cyclical based on commodity prices. And right now, what we did this past session did benefit the rural interests, but our folks in District 35 aren't getting that relief, and I hear a lot of concern about that. In terms of tax deferrals and tax increment financing, I used to be an advocate of that, but I think it's being taken advantage of right now. I think we're using it too much. I think in a stronger economy like we have now, I think it's unnecessary, and I think most of these projects would happen anyway, so I would really tighten up on the tax deferrals and tax increment financing, because I think things have changed and we're in a different economy now, and we've got to look at it in a very different light.
Mr. Newhouse?
I agree with a lot of that. As far as exemptions, you know, we have this thing called a not-for-profit organization, and I don't think a lot of people understand what that means. Not-for-profit doesn't mean they don't make profit. Not-for-profit means they don't pay tax. And there are a lot of them that don't fit those not-for-profit definitions any longer. And if you're turning millions of dollars of profit, you ought to pay tax on your property. So I'd get rid of some exemptions. The valuation thing, that's kind of a mayor's trick. You say, I lowered taxes. No, you didn't lower taxes. You lowered the mill levy because the valuations went up exorbitantly. No administration has ever lowered taxes, so that's just a trick. As far as tax increment financing, I think it's a valuable tool, but I agree with Mr. Zoll. I think it's overused to a certain extent. I believe we're allowed to have 35% of our property in a blighted designation, and I don't think 35% of Grand Island is blighted. And so I think it's overused, and it's valuable, but it does not reduce tax. The tax asking is always going to be the same. It's just a matter of who's going to pay it. If the people that get the TIF don't pay it, the rest of us do.
Okay, I know, Ms. Over. Tracy, I know you want to follow, but I think Mr. Zoll has a quick follow before you start.
I just wanted to get back to the concept of the three-legged stool between property tax, sales tax, and income tax. It is, in fact, out of whack, and we have too great a reliance on property tax. And I think we have to deal with that equation, and in particular, sales tax exemptions as well. And once we start looking at that, I think we can get a better handle on property tax.
Okay, you want to follow?
Yeah, my follow-up question here is, two of you stated that you thought that property tax exemptions have maybe gone too far. As some of you know, I cover the county board too, and the county board is struggling right now with a property tax exemption request from the Crane Trust and what the definition of educational exemption is. And they're struggling with that. They wish they had a more clear definition of an allowable educational exemption. If you were in the legislature today, and the county boards of supervisors came to you and said, what is your interpretation, what is the legislature's interpretation of educational in this context of the Crane Trust? Should that additional land be exempt or not?
Let's start again with Mr. Quick, since this is a follow-up to that. And let's do 60 seconds on these answers.
Okay. I guess I haven't really been involved in a lot of that, so I'd have to do a lot of research on that and to find out how I would to find out how I would go along with that.
Mr. Zoll?
Well, I'm a big supporter of the Crane Trust, and for years they boasted about how they were not taking advantage of this tax exemption, and they were proud to pay property taxes because they have so much land in Hall County. I think when we look at the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of acres of land across Nebraska that's held by these nonprofit groups, we've got to stop these exemptions because it's shifting increasingly a burden on our residential property owners. Everyone in this room is paying more and more in property tax because the pie is shrinking with these ever-increasing exemptions. I think addressing exemptions for property tax and sales tax is really going to be a critical part of the solution to this problem.
Mr. Newhouse, a minute.
Thank you. Well, for me, that's not a hypothetical because I did discuss that very issue with county board members. And my opinion is that if this land is making money, which a vast portion of their holdings are rented out to farmers, and they make money on it, just like the Catholic Church, just like St. Francis Hospital, they should pay tax on the lands that are for profit. It has nothing to do with their mission.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to, next question will be Mr. Sheard, and the first person to answer will be Mr. Zoll.
For the past 2 years, Senator Tommy Garrett has tried to get the legislature to legalize medical marijuana. What is your opinion on allowing medicinal use of marijuana in Nebraska?
I'm opposed to that bill. It's been done in other states, recently in Minnesota. I talked to Senator Gore about his study of the state of Minnesota, and he told me that there was tremendous abuse. It's a law with many unintended consequences. You open the door a crack for all the good reasons and all the tough cases, all the hard cases, but it opens it up to all sorts of abuse, because who can dispense these drugs for medical purposes, and how do you define medical purposes? Wherever it's been done in this country, it's been abused. And I think there are other ways to treat these folks. I also sat through the general session of the legislature when Senator Garrett talked about this bill, and I heard other senators respond. I've studied this very carefully, but I've come to the conclusion, despite many of the heartbreaking stories, that I would oppose that bill.
Mr. Newhouse.
Well, first of all, I think anything like that needs to go through an FDA approval process, and that hasn't been done. And you might note that it's still against federal law to use marijuana, even though some states allow it. And there are just too many variables in that at this time to allow it. I feel for those suffering, and this could be the answer for them. And more power to them. I wish we could come up with something. But in every state where so-called medical marijuana has been authorized, there's been widespread abuse. You just need a couple of unscrupulous practitioners to set up shop. They're not very good at other medicine, and they set up a little marijuana shop, and everything from a toenail that's ingrown to a stub toe to a hangnail to a headache gets a medical marijuana prescription. They do it in every state. Look at California. It's a joke. Now, how do we avoid that? If we could enact a law that would avoid those problems, I'd love to see those suffering get relief. But I haven't seen any state do it yet.
Mr. Quick.
Yeah, at this time I would have to wait and see what the research really says. Because I know there's people out there suffering maybe from seizures, from cancer, from pain. But at this point, I would say that even for medical marijuana, that I couldn't actually vote for that at this time.
Okay, a considerable amount of the legislative time and energy this year and in years previous has been spent on property taxes, the state prison system, the death penalty, medical marijuana, Medicaid expansion, even Nebraska's license plate. Given there's a finite time in any session, what other critical issue do you believe is not getting the attention it needs? And we'll start with you, Mr. Newhouse.
You know, I think our legislature does a good job. And I think they address most of the issues. But what we have is a split year legislature. We have a long session and a short session. This year was a short session. And when you have that short session, you get people like Senator Chambers and others who will dominate the time and not allow you to come up with the bills that you want to. In a short session, if you don't have, if it's not a priority bill, or if it's not a slam dunk out of the committee, or if it's if it's not on the consent agenda, it will not be debated. It will not be voted on. And so I think there's some problems there. The filibustering rules, I think, could be tweaked. I think filibustering is a valuable tool, but I think it's overused, and I think it's overused by just a couple of senators. So I can't say this issue and this issue. I'm going to say a lot of issues don't get the attention they deserve each year because we've got these silly rules and this split long session, short session.
Mr. Quick?
Well, I think one of the things that needs to be addressed is still with working families. We have working families struggling out there every day, and somehow we need to get either bring jobs in, bring up maybe education for skilled labor. I know the Career Pathways does a great job on the high school level, but we need to maybe do something for those students that attend secondary education they're actually already working in the job place, but they can't afford to do that because they still got to put food on the table. So we need those people. We need help for those people so they can continue their education, better their skills, help their employers out, and we need to bring better skilled labor jobs in the state of Nebraska and keep the ones that we already have.
Mr. Zoll?
But don't forget, this year the legislature considered a bill to allow people to take selfies at the polling place, believe it or not. I don't think the legislature is dealing with the critical issues facing the state. Every year we put Band-Aid solutions on open wounds. We are not solving the structural macro problems facing our state. Every session the legislature kicks the can down the road, pushes it off until another year. We're not solving problems, we're putting Band-Aids on them. And then we're dealing with frivolous issues. And the biggest issue confronting our state that we don't really talk about as a state is economic development. How do we grow, develop our economy, create more high-paying jobs, strengthen our tax base? That's the answer to countless problems. And we don't talk about that. We talk about these ancillary issues, and we have all these sideshows. And to me, the filibuster is simply unconstitutional. It negates the concept of the majority rule. It's a rule that creates a 33-vote threshold so that 16 people can overrule 33. That is nowhere in our Constitution. It's not democracy. And that's why the issues aren't being addressed, because they spend all these time filibustering issues, and we don't get to have votes on important bills.
Thank you. Any follow-up?
Yeah, I guess I would just suggest that you take another look at the Constitution. It's not prohibited. The legislature gets to make its own rules. And there's nothing in the Constitution, which I read again yesterday, that would prohibit that. So it's not unconstitutional at all. I don't like it all the time, but it's not unconstitutional.
I believe it is unconstitutional because I don't think a rule can trump our Constitution. And I recognize it's never been tested in court, but I'd like to see someone make that argument, because the reason we have gridlock in Washington and in Lincoln is everything is filibuster and we don't solve any problems. But regardless, let's change that rule and get rid of it, because that's the fair and proper thing to do in a democratic society.
Ms. Overstreet?
Well, since business growth and economic development is so important, let's talk about what you see as most beneficial tax incentives or ways to grow business in the state of Nebraska and create more jobs. And if you're going to give an example that's going to make a tax cut for a business, then I want to know what offset you would have to replace that revenue, because obviously we depend on the revenue.
Mr. Quick?
Well, the one thing on growing the economy and bringing jobs into this state, I think we need to make sure that we make sure our infrastructure is solid. I mean, if you're going to attract businesses to come into the state of Nebraska, we got to make sure we have good infrastructure. We also have to make sure that maybe we can improve the internet quality. I think businesses are relying on that ever more these days. And as far as if we need to pay for that, I guess that's something I would have to research to see what we could do. But I think a lot of that comes down to making sure Grand Island gets their money to put their infrastructure in for their roads, for bridges, for their streets, and just to make sure that we have all the things that will attract good business to this town.
Mr. Zoll?
I think the biggest thing we need to do as a state is really market our attributes. We've got the greatest people in this state and a dedicated workforce that's skilled and trained. We have a work ethic in this state. And that's the one thing that all businesses are looking for. We need to work on trade promotion. Not the show trade promotion trips that we've seen in the past, but really working to promote our agricultural products and industrial products overseas. We need to send the message of what Nebraska has to offer in terms of our exceptional quality of life, our workforce, our amenities, our infrastructure. Sometimes it's as simple as that. And if you're in business like I am, you know a lot of it is about marketing what you do and spreading the message. It's not about giveaways and handouts and tax incentives. We've got the best place in the world to raise a family and own a business and have a company and a manufacturing plant. We've got terrific agriculture. We've got tourism assets that most people don't even know about. Let's tell people and broadcast the message of Nebraska and what we're all about and what we have to offer.
Mr. Newhouse?
Well, the question is what incentives? And as I said a minute ago, some incentives are valuable if they're not overused. But here's the incentive I want to see. I want to see government out of my office. And I want to see government out of the banks. And I want to see government out of car dealerships. That's the incentive. Get out of the way. Government's function is not to develop the economy. Again, Adam Smith. Again, the Constitution. That's not the function of government. It's not a proper function of government. And if it doesn't get too far involved, a little bit of tweaking is okay. But we've gone far overboard with regulation, with incentives, and all of that nonsense. So that's my incentive. Get out of my way.
Mr. Sheard has a question. I believe this is a reader-submitted question, and Mr. Zoll will be first to answer.
That's the right question. If you were a sitting member of the legislature this session, how would you have voted on LB 900? The amendment to the helmet law allowing motorcyclists to ride without a helmet, and creation of a motorcycle rider-funded traumatic brain injury fund and a committee to oversee it.
I haven't given that bill a lot of thought. My gut reaction is that I'm in favor of a helmet law. I think it's a matter of safety, health. It has a cost to society. Again, I wouldn't say that I've studied that in any great way, but we have laws in our country that kind of protect us from ourselves. Seatbelt laws. You know, we as a society voted some years ago that we're going to require people to wear seatbelts. I don't think people argue about that today. They understand that's reasonable and proper, and that children are children's carriers, and that's a law too. I kind of look at the helmet law the same way. We can require people to put their children in car seats and adults to wear seatbelts, and people in the back seat to wear seatbelts. The helmet law seems like something very consistent with that.
Mr. Newhouse?
But interestingly, we don't require children on buses to wear seatbelts. Seems a little ridiculous, doesn't it? I believe in personal freedom, and I believe in personal choice. And with those choices and with that freedom comes personal responsibility. So I don't ride a motorcycle, but if I did, I would wear a helmet. But if you want to ride one and you don't want to wear a helmet, that's fine. Don't expect the state to take care of your medical expenses. But that's fine with me. I would vote against any further restrictions on freedom. And I would vote to repeal the health law.
Mr. Quick?
Yeah, I'd have to see more research on it myself. I know I have friends who ride motorcycles would love to not be able to have to wear their motorcycle helmets. And then I see the other side of it where people, if they're in a bad accident and if they'd been wearing their helmet, maybe it would have saved their life. So I would have to see more research one way or the other on how that would go before I can decide how I would vote.
Ms. Overstreet, unless there's no follow-up. Ms. Overstreet.
This is an alternative energy question. Nebraska's electric rates are among the nation's lowest, and yet the potential for alternative energy source development is great. What do you see for the state's energy future?
With you.
Well, I've met with representatives of various power districts, and I've met with manufacturers and owners of wind farms. I have friends who have windmills on their property, so I've met with farmers that have that. But, the environmentalists have taken over, and there's no common sense in energy anymore. It's about what's green, not about what you can afford. We can't build nuclear power plants because of environmentalists. And frankly, we don't have anybody trained in the United States to do so anymore. Coal is cheap, and it's clean, but every day you read about the environmentalists and, we've got to have so much wind energy, so much solar energy, so much. And ethanol is not a long-term problem. Ethanol should feed people, should feed cattle, should feed hogs, should feed people. So I don't think ethanol is a long-term answer. I think it's made a dent in the gas prices, and I appreciate that. Public power in Nebraska has traditionally been very inexpensive comparatively. And I hope we keep up with technology on existing fossil fuel sources and stop the silliness of looking for alternatives that cost far more.
Mr. Quick?
Yeah, I know the city of Grand Island has done a great job as far as they've looked into renewable energies, bought into some wind farms and things like that. The thing is that public power is put at a disadvantage when putting up wind towers. They don't get the same subsidies that private companies get. So if they could be put on a level playing field, I think public power could look into putting in more, they could get into that part of the industry, putting in windmills, putting in the wind generation. I know right now they just had to build transmission lines to bring the power from wind generation into the power grid. And the thing is, we've got to remember that we also need reliable energy. The wind doesn't blow all the time. For solar, the sun doesn't shine all the time, so you still have to have a backup so you've got power whenever you need it. And I know that all the power districts are getting onto the power grid and helping that way. So we just got to be diligent in making sure that we can have reliable power.
Mr. Joel?
I support the concept of wind energy and solar energy if it can be cost effective. It's not there now. The only reason it's utilized in some areas of the country is because of federal tax credits, which, as Mr. Quick indicated, can't be utilized in Nebraska. And I also think we have to look at the motivation. The motivation is to reduce carbon emissions from coal-fired power plants. It's not going to do that. The U.S. generates about 2% of the world's carbon emissions from coal plants. And if we increase the price of our electric rates, our goods and services are going to be more costly, and we're going to just push that production to these countries that don't care about reducing carbon emissions. And we're going to lose jobs, and we're going to lose a good chunk of our economy, and we will not have affected the problem one bit. So I think there's a whole big equation here that we haven't solved yet, and we really need to get the whole world involved in energy and in carbon emissions and how we're going to deal with that before just the United States tries to think it can affect the problem on its own.
Any follow?
Well, yes, just to Mr. Quick's answer, if you need a subsidy, it isn't sustainable. I don't think Henry Ford got a subsidy when he came up with a new idea. And I don't think we need subsidies for alternative energies. When they're sustainable without subsidy, great. Until then, let the investors take the risk and not the taxpayer.
Mr. Quick, go ahead.
I would like to add that they're also working on ways for carbon capture. And I think that will help with emissions eventually if they can make it safe. I know they're looking at putting plants besides a coal-fired power plant to capture all the carbon, use it for other facilities, and use it in other ways. So.
Mr. Zoll, any follow-up from you? No. Okay, it's about 7:20, so I'm going to ask one more question and then leave us time for your closing statements and some thank yous, and we'll get out of here before 7:30. We are meeting here tonight at one of Grand Island Public Schools, middle schools. If you saw a banner out on the wall from a local Islander student who was promoting reading, we'd be interested to know what book you are reading at the current time. I'll start with you, Mr. Zoll.
Well, the book I'm reading now is the book by, and I'm not thinking the author, but it's the book on Abraham Lincoln. The Fox News commentator, Bill O'Reilly, just wrote another book of historical figures. He talks about leadership and what President Lincoln did to really turn our country around in terms of providing equity and opportunity for all people. And I think he put that in a historical context and brought it forward to the present day in terms of what a turning point that was in our society. And I think when we look back at freedom and liberty and respect for all peoples, that book really speaks to that.
Mr. Newhouse.
Well, like every day, I read the Bible. And I don't read the whole Bible, naturally, but I read part of the Gospels every day. And then I turn back to the Old Testament so that I can finish that in my allotted time. I'm also reading several books at the same time by a man by the name of Richard John Newhouse, no relative, who was a Lutheran who converted to the Catholic Church and has some different insights on the Catholic Church. I'm a Catholic. And I'm reading, simultaneously, I'm reading the lives of various saints. For a number of years, I read fiction and I read all sorts of things. I do love to read, but I neglected my religious reading, and so I'm trying to make up for that. So I'm not trying to sound holy. I'm trying to get to a place of holiness.
Thank you. Mr. Quick.
Well, at the present time, I'm not reading a book, but I do read the Grand Island Independent. So.
No one's putting up to that.
So that's one of my favorite things to read right now. It gives me all the information that I need, and I love to read the sports page the most.
Thank you. Well, we're going to do our closing statements, and by the candidates Drew and Mr. Quick will go first, followed by Mr. Newhouse, and then Mr. Zoll. You have 1 minute on the closing statements.
As you can see, I'm not as well spoken as the other two candidates. I may not be up on every issue like they are, but what you will find with me is that I'm genuine, and that I care about people, I care about working families, and I care about the city of Grand Island and Hall County. And I want to do the best job I can when I get down there. It doesn't mean, because I don't speak as well as these other two fellows, that I'm not going to work hard. That's where I come from. My parents taught me to work as hard as I could, to give 100%, and be proud of the work that I do. And that's what I would do for you if you elect me. I thank you all for being here tonight, and I hope you will come out and vote for me on May 10th. Thank you.
Mr. Newhouse.
Well, I'd like to thank the Grand Island Independent and Leadership Tomorrow for hosting this forum. And I'd especially like to thank my wife, Leslie, for having my back for 41 years. As you've heard, we have some differences on the issues. I will be a strong, conservative voice for Grand Island. I will represent you with honesty and integrity. Aside from the issues, we have very different backgrounds. Mr. Quick is heavily supported by the unions, who will certainly come calling if he's elected. and Mr. Zoll has a checkered history as a bureaucrat. I'm not quite sure how you can earn public trust when you've betrayed it and been fired from public service jobs several times, charged with crimes in your official capacity. As voters, your decision is important, and it's going to determine Grand Island's future for the next 4 to 8 years and beyond. I hope I've earned your trust and your vote on May 10th.
Mr. Zoll?
This election is not about campaign hype. I don't think this election is about the three of us. This election is about you. Grand Island has 10 city council members, 9 school board members, 7 county supervisors, and just 1 state senator. This election is to make sure that Grand Island has a strong and effective voice at the Capitol. Senator Glore is leaving big shoes to fill as chairman of one of the most powerful committees. Who will represent Grand Island before the legislature? Who will debate Ernie Chambers, build coalitions, and understand the complex issues of taxation and regulation? I have already done these things on behalf of the people of Grand Island, except to debate Ernie Chambers, and I look forward to doing that as well. Thank you, and I hope to earn your vote on May 10th.
Thank you. My first order of business would be to thank the 3 candidates for coming out tonight and sharing their views with us. We have some other people to thank here tonight. Sierra Sanchez in Walnut Middle School, thanks for your hospitality. Sierra's up in the booth, making sure we all sound as good as we possibly can. Brenda Brandstetter and her team of timers from Leadership Tomorrow, thank you for keeping us moving along. We appreciate that. From the Independent, Zach Mayhew and Garrett Grease did a great job of, once again, getting us online, and so you'll be able to see this sometime tomorrow. Zach will have it up. Am I right, Zach? Good, thank you. And a special thanks to my colleagues from asking questions. You didn't answer, you asked them. Tracy Overstreet, Jack Shear, thank you so much. Please remember to vote. There are voter registration materials out in the hallway. Good night from the Independent, and I guess I'll see some of you on your front porch Sunday morning.
Stay up to date with all the latest with our email alerts. You can sign up for email alerts on our website, theindependent.com.